Greetings, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Pep Talks Uncut. We're in our third season, and this is episode 2. And today in our studio, we happen to have Glenn Tuttle, who is from Meadville, Crawford County, Pennsylvania. And Glenn, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, I've been the acting chair of the Libertarian Party of Crawford County, Pennsylvania for, what is it now? About 5 years or so. We've been actually a little longer than that, about 8 years. Been active politically, have been a national delegate for the Libertarian National Convention. Of course, been a state delegate as well. For numerous state conventions that we've had every other even year. And I've been an active libertarian since about 2012 when I flipped both back and forth. I was a Democrat for about 25 years. I was a Republican for about, oh God, maybe 5 or 6 because I ran for school board.
Mhm.
I ran for school board as an elected Republican. And when Donald Trump came on board, I immediately went back to my libertarianism and became the chair of the Libertarian Party of the county again.
Okay, so in your role as chair of the Libertarian Party, what are some of the policy positions you hold for Crawford County? Let's start with housing. Um, Recently, the Crawford County Housing Authority brought a new person on board. I believe it's Jim Thompson, and the motivation for that seemed to be to help folks not only achieve home ownership and residency here in the county, but to protect their rights as either tenants in a tenant landlord situation or in housing. So where do the libertarians come down in terms of housing?
Well, where we would stand is that government should be removed from the regulations and also in offering basically not home ownership. We always want to encourage that. Just don't think that government is the best place in order to do it. That private market is much more effective at guiding lower rental prices. Every time you add regulation to any free market industry, including being landlords, you're going to drive up the price. Um, I think the idea of an entity such as Common Roots is a wonderful thing, especially trying to get private home ownership, especially within city limits, because we need all the home ownership we can get here. But in offering and or assisting in public housing, we would stand in support of getting rid of Department of Housing because we like the free market to provide a much lower price. And in guarding individual rights, though, towards health and safety, as an individual, this is how I'll kind of guard this. As an individual, yes, I believe that government has the necessity in order to protect life, liberty, and also private property. So if you have a slumlord who's coming in order to rent a subpar or really unsafe dwelling, then yes, government has a right to step in and hold them accountable and make sure that it's at least safe to live in. After that, I don't believe government has any role in the housing market.
Well, I would argue that it's not only the government's right to step in the case of an unsafe dwelling, but it's their duty. That government serves as a protector against the type of slumlord that you just described.
And that's, I think, where we most reasonable, moderate libertarians could agree. Now, the anarchists would be like totally rip it out of everything, but I think most moderates who would lean a little more conservative, but still the rights to life, liberty to do as you will without hurting others, and private property are the most important things. So protection of life and private property here, I think, would apply in maintaining safety. That I think we all can agree on. We don't want anybody burning up because there's, subpar electrical, but we get that anyways, even with regulation. Unfortunately, we've had incidents in the city of Meadville over the last maybe 3 to 5 years of numerous fire structures,
Mhm.
and bad things have happened to that. Well, where was government then protecting that individual's right to life?
Mhm.
Okay, they're ineffective even when they are implemented.
Right.
Um, I think it is a tenant right and responsibility in order to report when they're having issues. Okay, you notice your electrical subpar, you short out every time you plug in a blender. Landlord's not doing anything about it. Who do you call? The city manager or the fire chief, one or the other. And but you have to take that responsibility. A landlord probably isn't going to report themselves for big health code violations. And I do believe that most moderate libertarians, those who sit kind of center of our party, would agree with that platform and statement. Not everyone, but because we're it's like herding cats in the Libertarian Party, to be quite honest. But I think most of us could agree.
Okay, so locally, a number of people through social media have complained about increased prices, not just for housing, but for all the other things that go along with keeping up a household, such as utility costs, groceries, and so forth. Do you blame that on inflation, corporate greed, or are there other forces at work driving the market that are keeping overall prices somewhat elevated as compared to what they were, say, 2 or even 3 years ago?
Oh, I would definitely go with more government blame. You know what I mean? Not 100% or zero in any argument, but I definitely would play the fact that inflation, when we received all of those coronavirus checks, how happy we were to receive 1,400. Well, when you've printed 80% of the total national currency in a 2-year time frame, you're going to have a problem later on down the road. More money in the supply means increased prices. And due to demand increase, of course, prices also elevated with that after Corona kind of subsided. So now we're facing inflationary, impacts and lashback because of printing off all those checks, offering all the assistance, the PPP loans, which were grossly abused. And I mean, if you want to look further, please feel free. But there are lots of fraud cases now coming up with that. But due to the increased money supply, created inflation through government policy. And now this is why you're paying, the government says maybe 3% increased inflation. I do not agree. I know when I go shopping, it's a lot more than that. I know when I'm going down to the gas station, it's a lot more than 20% than it was, 2, 3 years ago. And inflation's just finally come to bite us in the hide, and thank government policy for that.
So when it comes to you mentioned gasoline. When it comes to gasoline, isn't part of the problem with the gasoline cost in Pennsylvania specifically more driven by the increased taxes in
Yes,
gasoline,
yes, it is.
which I believe Governor prior to Tom Wolf, Governor um, his name is slipping my mind.
Oh, oh God. He's now Director of Homeland Security, or he was. Is he
Not
left?
Tom Ridge. No, in
Not Tom
between.
Ridge,
No,
who
no, no,
was
no. In
before
between.
him?
Corbett. Tom Corbett.
Oh, there we go. Okay, good to go. Good to
Yes,
go. He
Tom
was only in
Corbett
office.
increased the gasoline tax, and we were told at the time that the money that was coming into the state's coffers were going to be used to improve road conditions on the various interstate highways and the various thoroughfares throughout the Commonwealth. But I'm failing to see
Any
sufficient
improvement?
evidence of that improvement. Now, locally, yes, we do have change coming to the bridge
Oh,
between
yes.
Meadville and
Yep.
Vernon Township, and I-79 certainly has been repaired quite a bit. But gasoline taxes, what would the libertarians do to address the issue of lowering the cost of gasoline? Is it all tax based, or are there
Think
incentives?
that's a
Yeah.
darn good starting point. Is it the only solution? Again, not 100%, not zero, but it'd be a damn good start. I think you could get a lot of that's just pork. We know that it's not necessarily going back where it all belongs, and a lot of it isn't transparent spending. I think even libertarians would be more agreeable to, and I'm going to joke lightly here to any libertarians listening, but to my roads, that you can't actually have roads without government interference. We tend not to believe that that's true. You have actually an example in Kansas, I want to say it was, they built like 20 miles worth of roadway for farmers. They got together, blah, blah, blah. Now, in a perfect world, that could work again, and government will be involved because it's not a perfect world. But I think you could decrease the tax rate, and you could also hold them accountable. Have a full audit done of spending regarding transportation. Where are these tax dollars going? We need to see it cent for cent. Holding government accountable to these programs also matters a lot too to libertarians, even if you support some form of government and aren't an anarchist. You can hold them accountable and keep their feet to the fire, regardless of the party level, Democrat, Libertarian, Republican, Green Party, it doesn't matter. But you can all hold their feet to the fire and examine the dollars that they're spending. And I don't believe there's enough transparency on that. We don't hear enough of exactly dollar for dollar. How is this going? And that I think would be a solid libertarian standpoint.
Back in 2023, there was a massive train derailment in East Liverpool, Ohio, that caused quite a bit of noxious gas to be emitted into the air. And there was a massive explosion, and both Pennsylvania and Ohio state government got involved, and U.S. Secretary of Transportation Pete Buttigieg ordered an official investigation through the various governmental agencies in the federal government. Do you think that a sufficient number of steps were taken to protect the public in that massive train derailment, and what steps can be taken to prevent future train derailments?
I think, unfortunately and sadly, that these types of accidents are going to happen no matter what you do. I do believe that the regulations in place, I believe for protection of life, liberty to do as you will, and private property, again, especially life here with noxious gas making people sick, that government has a role in order to come in and regulate for those specific things. But I do believe that the EPA is too cumbersome at this point to the free market. It's causing more harm than good at this point. Do I think any increased regulations would have saved that derailment? No. Trains, unfortunately, all over the nation now, not as dramatic as this one, all over the nation go off, derail every day. If you want to address a deeper problem in, okay, maybe there is a problem with road construction there, rail construction. Okay, again, do an audit. How good are our train rails? How effective is, train leadership, as it were? How good are our engineers? How overworked are they? I think those are solid arguments as well. But to get more of the EPA out of things, from more of a practical business standpoint, I think that libertarians would agree with repealing unnecessary regulation. I don't believe any more regulation would have prevented such a horrible accident.
Well, the EPA is certainly one.
Not the only, yeah.
Yeah, right, because the U.S. Department of Transportation, I think, has an obligation to make sure, through the efforts of the states, that the train system, for what it's worth in this country, is not only properly regulated and monitored for safety reasons, but that it's modernized, because a lot of the track that exists now was designed for decades ago.
If
And
you get the government out of it, though, they'll have more of an inspiration in order to modernize. Because I'm sure the train industry, if they were unsubsidized, they would be scrambling to modernize because they are behind the times by about 50 years. We do live in a very outdated electrical grid. I think repealing unnecessary regulation, and yes, unnecessary is a very vague term, but if you can look at it and go, okay, let's do an audit of everything from top to bottom to the last nut on the last rail, then actually address existing problems and modernize accordingly. Leave that to the train, between train makers and train runners as well, such as Amtrak, so on and so forth. I think it's best left in the hands of the experts who actually control that business. Not saying that the government shouldn't be there, A, for cleanup and B, for protection. More importantly, protection, ounce of prevention. But I think you can do that for a full audit. And if you see huge glaring things in there that definitely threaten the life of, Americans, okay, then you step in and you intervene as necessary. But I believe it can be cleaved much more than it is right now. I think most libertarians would agree with that, at least a majority of us, that government has that role for protection of life and liberty. But how far are they going with it?
right.
We can agree on health and safety. That's definitely a health and safety issue. Yes, okay, we need to at least examine the root cause of what happened. How can we address that? How can we prevent it from happening again? That, I believe, is a well-established, role of government. Anything after that, no. You have no reason to be in a business that you're killing off decade by decade. overbearing regulations, no one's investing in it. No one's coming in. No brand new blood is coming into the mix. We're paying the same old people in order to keep running the same old system.
You sound like you've just described most of the utility companies in Pennsylvania.
I kind of did. I kind of did.
In a backhanded way, yeah. And I am in agreement on that. There are a number of companies that, in my mindset, come off more like monopolies,
Yeah.
right? Yes, they may have holding parent companies that watch over them so that that various electric companies or utility companies form a standard cohesive means for delivering electricity or water or natural gas. But the question is, at what point do if government pulls out of the equation, do those monopolies run amok and get to the point that they drive up energy costs solely for the sake of lining their own pockets?
Well, now here's where I'll kind of split off and speak more individually than party representative. Again, a 0 or 100 argument. Should government remove itself completely from the equation? No, it can't. It quite simply can't. We can't leave unchecked people, just running the rodeo. Having said that, what are we doing already? They're fairly well unchecked as it is. They just pay more in fines. Ask me anything. I'm a nurse and work in modern healthcare, and they keep paying the fines. No one does anything, and the same problems keep reoccurring. What good is the government right now with it? You can have every regulation on the book, but if you've been lobbied enough and or bribed enough, you're not going to follow it anyways. You're certainly not going to enforce it. And do I think that they're lining their pockets already? You could look at any of your, the tax balances giving subsidies to how many, utility companies and how many other companies for that matter. And I'll bring up Corona with that. You paid your fee, you were able to solicit business under Governor Wolf. I thought that was wrong then. I still think it's wrong now. Just government was prostituting the ability to actually carry on business. I don't agree with that. I think that that is the role of the free market, that people should have decided whether they wanted to shop or not, even
Mhm.
though there was a small risk at that time. We didn't know how small, and it was hitting us like nails, but we were far too late. And government intervention at that point, again, did not work. It was not effective and it was corrupt. I think that would be a huge point that all of the party members could agree on.
Mhm.
Eliminating the corrupt pieces, getting rid of the unnecessary regulations that strangle, innovation in business and bringing in new blood, letting the small man compete. If it's you over $100 million agency, who's going to win? The $100 million agency, because they're going to bribe your local legislator to pass more state regulations to keep the lower man out of the equation. I think that occurs across all industries, including especially utility companies. It would be great to see all of these new providers come in, offer a competitive rate, who's getting the best deal. Let the free market fight it out. And if they get out of hand, then we bring them back with the use of government, by fines and or by closing of facilities if need be. If you're going to do it right. And that's what they don't do now.
Mhm. Fascinating. Yeah, I like the approach that you've taken that that if we pull the government back entirely, that that conditions with utility companies and others will only worsen. So, in other words, you're suggesting a limited form of government that that monitors, but doesn't necessarily involve itself in every single problem or every single economic decision that needs to be made.
Right. If
Okay.
anything, keep out of the economic piece. But if you see a threat, I'm a conservatarian, quote unquote, basically conservative, limited use. If we can get government back into the form of the Constitution, that'd be a darn good start. Now, a Constitution is not a perfect document by any stretch or imagination, but it's still the one we follow. If we can get it back into those confines and leave the 10th Amendment, let the states decide who does what with, let's say, uh, electricity, gas, so on and so forth, especially in Department of Transportation issues as well. Health. Each state can decide its own course of care, including education. Among all markets, I think the more limited government is, the more freedom you have in order to have competition that benefits the consumer and reduces prices and increases quality.
Now, one of the problems with relying solely on the 10th Amendment as your justification for uh, conditions such as healthcare, questions related to healthcare in one state, for example, with the trans community, varies significantly, for example, between Texas and Florida or Indiana and here in Pennsylvania. In Texas, Florida, and Indiana, if you're trans and you're seeking gender affirming care as a minor, or eventually maybe as an adult, you're not going to find it in your home state. So you'll have to travel out of state to.
Libertarian position on healthcare. Get government out of it completely. Government has no place in the decisions of the human body. I don't trust them with my tax dollars. Why would I trust them with such intimate care, especially in the trans community?
Okay,
I think
so,
government should be removed from that completely.
but then who pays for it?
They do.
Who
They do.
does?
Or their insurance providers, if they, have insurance. If they have insurance, if they find a plan that covers that care, they pay for it. And in
So,
gender affirming under behavioral health, it wouldn't be too far of a stretch in order to see that be
uh-huh.
a policy benefit that you could achieve off of buying the right insurance every month, if you have it. And under what Medicaid and like I say, removing myself out from believing that's going to go anywhere. Medicaid, Medicare, do I believe that those should cover it? No, I think that's the use of tax dollars for non-life-threatening care. It's not med management. I believe after the age of 18, though, yes, you certainly have the right to be your true person, but
Mhm.
that it should not be on the public dime.
Hmm.
And
S-
it does present a crossroads as a gay man in order to say that about health care, but I don't believe government should be in any fiscal decision regarding the human body.
Now,
I I
if
don't.
that's true, though, can insurance companies then be compelled to offer policies for the trans community?
I think competition wise, certainly if you have enough of the LGBT community at all, QIAA plus, all band together and go to a series of providers who offer trans affirmative care, certainly I think that the free market would again, hey, we see this market, they want to make money. Let's face it for what it is. And we provide a wonderful pool of disposable income as a population versus traditional policies is how I'll put that, but that you could find policy providers who would be more than willing to do that for a profit. And I think with enhanced competition, you'd find better quality plans for a cheaper price.
Okay, so to recap on this topic, you're for using the 10th Amendment when it comes to pulling government out of and letting states make decisions regarding things like the utility companies and transportation and so forth. But when it comes to individual healthcare, it becomes the individual's responsibility to cover the cost, and the states themselves should even pull back completely. The both federal and state governments should pull out entirely,
As long as it isn't
along
a
with free
threat to their life. If it's a threat to their life, let's say a psychiatrist could honestly say that this trans individual may not make this journey without this surgery. If it's a
Mhm.
threat to their life as an individual, and again, I'm kind of stepping off my, the
You're out of the
political line,
libertarian
as it
box
were.
for a moment. Yeah.
But that it is they should be removed as much as possible unless it presents an immediate threat to life or that they're not going to make it through this process if they don't have gender affirming surgery, then I think it would be more than justified in order to exercise government to go, okay, let them do it. Government should have no say in what you do with your body either, but does it have a responsibility in order to carry you through that decision? No, I can't say that it does. Unless it threatens your immediate life, then yes. Doctor comes up and says, no, this person isn't going to make it. Okay, I could see Medicare services or Medicaid services being compelled in order to cover that. Um, it would be a stretch and it wouldn't be the common course, but I could see that being a necessary intervention for that individual's life.
Now, uh, in the uh, in the presidential debate and at various uh, rallies held around the country, GOP nominee Donald Trump has referred to people who are in prisons getting gender affirming care. Should prisons be offering
No,
trans folks the
no,
opportunity to
I
be
don't,
in, well,
no.
let me
Yep.
finish. Not only to be in a prison that matches their gender identity rather than their sex assigned at birth, but then to get whatever gender affirming care they need, like you said, to sustain life.
Now, assigned gender, quote unquote, versus transgender, that's honestly, that's a tough one, whether they should be in with the prison population of their identity or whether it should match more of their external biology.
Right.
That one's a tough one. I'll admit I don't know quite where I stand on that one. If immediately, having a rug out underneath me on that. If I had to just take a stab at it, though, or at least how most would interpret it, I don't know whether I agree with. I don't agree with Trump on that. I don't know though. Is it safer for that individual to be in their own biological, you know, born biologically prison or whether they go to the prison of their choice? I don't know. I would have a concern about a trans woman being in a
A
male
prison.
population.
Sure.
I would have significant concerns, but I'd also have significant concerns with the trans man being in a men's prison. That could also prove, you see where I'm going with this?
That could be really
I think
dangerous.
that would have to be a individual by individual basis.
Mhm.
Because transgenderism, it is about 1% of the population
Right.
ish, give or take. I think that would have to be presented on an individual basis and let judges decide on that
Right.
individually. Now, does that mean you won't run into deep core conservative Christian judge who just hates the gays kind of thing and puts them in prison of biological gender, causing that problem? No, but I think it is a better construct to just do it individual by individual instead of increasing. Let a judge interpret that. They'll know better about that individual and their circumstance than a state governor will.
Right. Right. Well, that takes us to one more topic for today because we're
Okay.
running low on time. But I wanted to talk with you a little bit about education. Um, Education in this country seems to be um, such that books, for example, are being banned in school libraries. And much of the push for that in Pennsylvania, anyway, is coming from a firm called the Independence Law Center. My question to you is, should school librarians be put in the awkward position of having to remove books from the shelves uh because parents have complained and they don't want their individual children reading particular books that are found in the school library?
All right. Well, to start off really quickly, I believe school choice is a thing too, especially for our population, that school choice matters.
Mm.
That if you don't want your child in a school that removes books, that bans them. And I think that's just a curse upon reason is to ban books. It just makes no sense to me.
Mhm.
I think age appropriateness, that matters. But for actual banning of books, oh no, 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 no. But that's why we should be able to choose the schools that our children go to.
Mhm.
Um, is your local public school doing its service? Is it banning the books? Okay, maybe there's another more welcoming private academy or public charter, public school charters. I love the idea of those. It still holds the public option to use your kids' tax dollars in their education at a different facility. Or if you don't like any of them and you feel like no matter where you're looking, you have districts and or individual schools who don't want to use reason and ban books, why can't you homeschool them and use your tax dollars in order to supply, all of the necessary funding for books, equipment, so on and so forth?
Mhm.
Having said that, no books should be banned, period. Or if they are, it has to be of such extreme pornographic or violent, non-educational value that anyone could reasonably agree on it. But that's the thing, we're not using our reason anymore. Oh, this has a bad topic on it. Let's ban Mark Twain. Reading isn't supposed to just educate it. It's supposed to elevate you as well. And a lot of those banned books, they contain adult themes, but how do we teach our children about adulthood without having them read and explore those topics that may be uncomfortable? Especially when you can do it in a relatively safe space that you can discuss uncomfortable ideas at times and ideas that not everyone's going to agree on.
Mhm.
Um, Having said that, again, I promote school choice because of that. Where can I go for my child to have the best access to education that I feel is appropriate for them? If it happens to be that banned book center, okay, good for you. But I don't want my little Johnny in order to go to that same school. So I'm
O-
going to take him to the public charter down the street.
Okay, but you mentioned earlier in the program uh, pulling government oversight out of education to an extent.
Yeah.
Would you argue that school vouchers then should be given to the students who are transferring? Should the tax
Yes.
dollars follow them to their new school to cover the tuition costs?
I believe since every student, the school district receives a set value for them, whatever it may be in that given year, adjusted for special needs, so on and so forth, that same amount of value can be used by that parent to take that child anywhere that they choose to. Now, having said that, I also believe it's their responsibility to transport them there. It's also their responsibility to make sure that they've got all their books and supplies, that should completely fall out of public school hands, that no district should have to pay for, a seat in child's books,
Mhm.
or their transportation either. The parent wants them there, that's great. They get enough for their tuition and whatever else that they agree upon,
Mhm.
but that we're not liable for their transportation. That alone would save approximately $50 million a year in education. So while I am a proponent of school choice, I also believe it's a personal responsibility of the parents too. If you want to take them out of the public school, that's great, good for you,
Mhm.
but you've got to pay the excess costs, and no other, parent should have to pay that price or other taxpayer.
Well, Glenn, it has been a real treat having this
Yeah.
conversation. I've enjoyed it a lot, and I'd like to invite you back to the show. Um, let's have you back in a couple of weeks,
Okay.
right before the election, so that we
Ooh, all
can
right.
talk. I'd like to talk a little bit about where the election stands at that time and what are some of the other issues impacting the LGBTQ plus community in Pennsylvania.
Okay.
And yeah, and I'd also like to explore further what if you have school choice and school vouchers and the tax dollars go along, there are other issues that are involved, such as athletics and
To participate in home district events such as
exactly,
in sports,
yeah, that kind of thing.
that's already there. I think that is a safe compromise because the parents would still be picking them up, taking them to practices, to rehearsals, what have you. That's a compromise. It's just more children together. And of course, I would always support socialization.
Right.
So yes, fully agree with that as well, that yes, they have a right to be part of that district too. In after school events, good stuff like that, as long as the parents taking that lion's share of responsibility on them.
Very good. Okay, well, that wraps us up for this
Awesome.
week here on Pep Talks Uncut. And we'll be back again next week for another episode here on Pep Radio.